Hey everybody, and welcome to Let's Look at the Novelist. The very first thing I want to talk about here is I apologize on behalf of my own voice. I may sound a little bit hoarse, I'm a little bit under the weather, but the Novelist comes out tomorrow and I wanted to make a video to kind of celebrate it and talk about it a little bit. Let's get one other thing out of the way right off the bat here. This is not your traditional game, this is not a shooter, this is not a puzzle platformer, this is not a racing game. This is kind of a Gone Home style narrative adventure game, if that makes any sense. There are gameplay mechanics, at least superficially it is kind of a stealth-based game, but that doesn't really factor into it too much. This is a story of you being in the same house as this family that's kind of vacationing in, I think, Oregon in the summer, in the country, getting away from the city, and it's a family with a husband and a wife and a kid, and you are basically learning about their lives, but also helping to shape the course of what's going to happen over their summer, and it's beautiful and tragic and incredibly sad, but also uplifting at some points. If you're not into games like Gone Home, Dear Esther, etc., etc., you're not going to be into this at all. You might as well turn back now, lest you just get more annoyed by the fact that this game exists for whatever reason. But in any case, I liked it a great deal when I played it through in a couple of sittings earlier this week. So I'm going to start a new game. We have the option to play on either stealth mode or story mode. Functionally, I don't see too much difference. Basically, there is a gameplay mechanic where it's kind of a stealth-based game, and if the family discovers you, then you can have trouble progressing in the way that you want to, potentially. And the story mode takes away that stealth mechanic, which I don't think it matters too much, so I'm not going to go through the brief tutorial because I've already done this. Now, there will probably be a lot of times when the voice acting kicks in, and I will shut up for a lot of those to give you a feel for how the voice acting actually is. Also convenient for me to take a second to rehydrate myself so that I don't have to, you know, run my throat completely raw. So, just starting out here, this is the house that we will be experiencing where we'll be experiencing, I should say, 100% of the gameplay in the Novelist. The way that this works is we're kind of like a spirit or a specter or something like that, where we can possess light fixtures, and this allows us to travel around the house, but we can also walk around in kind of like a first-person style here. It's never really explicitly mentioned, you know, what the heck is going on unless it is contained in some of these notes that are kind of ambiently scattered around the house. Now, let me do a little bit of exploration here. I'm like a cameraman. So you can see that there are people living in the house. Here we have Dan. He is the patriarch of the family and a novelist who was struggling to finish his second book. Lots of parallels to Gone Home. You know, they obviously both were in development concurrently, but it's kind of funny for me to see, like, oh, the dad's a writer. That is, like, pretty Gone Homey. And prepare for those comparisons to come, you know, fast and furious here. As a result of the fact that there are many of them. Now, let me see. There should be two other members of the house here somewhere. Let's try not to get discovered. Eventually, the layout of the house just becomes kind of second nature. All right. Oh, okay. So she didn't notice me there, but that's just going to make her suspicious for a minute. This is Linda. She is the matriarch of the house, I suppose you could say. Mother of the child of the house and an aspiring painter. And where is Tommy? Probably in the TV room. Hello? Oh. Never mind. Okay, well, I'll just explain how the heck the story progresses then. Basically, the game is divided or subdivided into 12 chapters, and the way that you actually progress through these chapters is each one is kind of framed as a problem. For example, one problem might be the family doesn't know where they want to go or what they want to do for their vacation, and each member of the family has their own kind of unique compromises, I guess you could say, their own unique desires that they want. For example, Dan doesn't want to go on vacation at all, for example, because he wants to spend more time finishing his book, which is really stressing him out. Linda wants to spend time with Dan because she feels that their relationship is a little bit rocky, and Tommy wants to go to an amusement park and he found like a free flyer so that he doesn't understand why his family wouldn't want to go. And you have to pick the one of those outcomes that you think just feels right with you, and inevitably that's going to disappoint one or more people, but in any case, let's do the other kind of mechanic we can do here. So, by walking behind one of these family members, you can actually control their thoughts. Now, or not control their thoughts, explore their memories. Now, what you want to do here, this is like the detective aspect of the whole game. We're finally going to get into some of the actual gameplay here, because as of right now, I'm just jabbering on over top, and this is not doing a very good job explaining why this game is actually engaging. So, basically, when you enter someone's memory, there are 3 clues that you can find, and these clues will give you a hint as to what they will want to do with this compromise. So remember, this chapter is called Writer's Block. We'll see what the problem is now, starting with Linda.
Do you think coming here will help?
It has to.
Alright, so Linda says, do you think coming here will help? And Dan says it has to. And then, if we follow the sound, we should be able to find one more clue that will maybe clue us into what's going on in the story around us here. This might be a note. Let's see.
Tommy rode into town with me today. He saw some kids his age playing on the swings at the park, and I could tell he wanted to go play with them. It got me thinking, did we swing the pendulum too far just to get him away from those bullies? Kids can bounce back quick sometimes. What if this is the worst thing we could have done? Then he asked how Daddy's book was going, and without even thinking, I said, great, my man. Felt awful right away.
So, I got out of that voice acting there, because I think you got a feel for what's going on here, basically. You know, in those 3 little clues, and this is what the game is very good at, it is kind of scratch the surface and let us look inside to what's going on in this family's life. So we know that Dan has writer's block. Linda says, do you think coming here will help? So obviously, like, it was something he was struggling with long into the past, and he thought that maybe a change of scenery would help. And then by reading his journal, we get 2 clues, which is Dan is obviously frustrated with his book. He lied to his son to say that it was going well, and his son got bullied in school, so maybe that's another reason they came to the summer house. So we're getting information piecemeal as things go on. Now, in addition to being able to possess people's memories and examine them, we can also go look up these notes. And again, very Gone Homey, you find these clues. It's a little bit more explicit for the most part. I'm gonna skip by this. We'll let the voice acting do some talking a little bit later, but for now, I'm just gonna look at all the notes because this is how we get our next clue. And we'll read all the notes that we come across. Maybe I'll take an opportunity to actually read this. Oh, I won't because of the voice acting that's talking over top of it. But yeah, the clues are a little bit more on the nose, shall we say? Like, instead of... Yeah, I mean, you can see this one, for example. It's just the son being like, oh, come on, Dad, why won't you play with me? And the dad's like, oh, go away, I'm frustrated with my book. Yeah, as opposed to something like Gone Home, where maybe you'd find like a record or like half of a school project or something like that with a grade on it. In this one, it's very much the character basically speaking to the camera and being like, this is why I feel bad, and that's not necessarily to say that it's less valuable than the stuff in Gone Home. It is a little bit more obvious, and that's fine, because, you know, you really get to know the family as a result. So we're gonna try to possess Tommy here.
Hey, Mommy.
He is, oh, he's gonna walk in here with his, into his mom's room. Oh! She's gonna see me. If she becomes suspicious twice, that will actually make it impossible for us to get the outcome for her. Where did she go anyway?
I'm faster.
I should mention, ooh, maybe I can just sneak past here and then possess them. This is kind of a dangerous time to be doing this, but sure, whatever. Let's try to possess the wife here. Oh, she's gonna see me when she comes out, but now we can see what she wants. So we've already seen, or what her problems are. We've already seen what Dan's problems are. If we come up here, maybe you gotta follow the noise. So, oh, if I had to guess, I would say she's probably in the painting room. Usually there's one thing in there. Nope. Okay, that's where I started, actually. I should have known that. Oh, okay, so we've got one out here. This is a journal entry. I'll let her speak.
I think we've done a good job of putting on happy faces for Tommy. If he knows there's something wrong, he's not showing it. We told him this is just a fun family vacation, and he seems to like it here so far. But this might be it for Dan and me. Neither one of us has said the word yet, but I know it's right there under the surface. We've been dancing around it.
Okay, so I'm gonna exit. Oh,
Hey, honey, what you doing?
Okay, I didn't mean to exit out. Sorry. I just meant to exit out of the actual journal entry itself. So you can see there's another clue. Dan and Linda are having problems with their relationship. And one thing I want to talk about here before we get our next clue is that in contrast to something like Gone Home, which is a very linear and focused and scripted experience, there are differential outcomes that you come across in the Novelist, and the story goes in different directions and has different results overall, depending on the choices that you make. In every chapter, you have the opportunity to either... Are they in the bedroom up here? Where is she? In every chapter, you have the opportunity to either... You can take one solution from one family member. Let me just see here for a second. We'll let them talk for a second because I'm having trouble focusing my thoughts here.
I promise.
Me too.
I promise.
Me too.
Occasionally, and this is taking me out of the moment here, but you can get some really, like, dental plan, Lisa needs braces moments.
I promise.
Me too.
I promise.
Dental plan.
Me too.
Anyway, so yeah, you can see that they're both working hard to make this relationship work, obviously. Now, let me just kind of possess a light fixture and I'll talk for a second. In contrast to Gone Home, which is a very focused, linear, scripted experience, this is, you know, scripted, obviously, and a narrative experience, but there are branching paths depending on the kind of choices that you make throughout the story. So the choices that you make are meaningful, not just superficial. So, in every chapter, every character has the solution that they want to a problem. I don't know if we can see Dan's yet. We can't. We need to find more clues until we can actually see what their solutions are. But you can take one solution, which makes one person happy and 2 characters disappointed. And then you can also take one compromise, which will make one of the 2 characters that was disappointed feel not so bad about it. Like, they still know that they're important to some extent. So I'm just going to go, and we have to explore a little bit more to just discover some clues that will eventually make it possible for us to see what the motivations for each character are. So, to completely take the veil off, you have the option basically of pleasing the husband, wife, or child, and ignoring one or 2 of the other ones. So the choices that you make and the patterns that you kind of reinforce with that will affect the outcome that this family has at the end of the summer. Is Dan going to finish his book? Maybe if you focus on his stuff as much as possible, he'll be able to finish his book, but at what cost? Maybe his relationship with Linda will suffer, or maybe, please tell me they're not seeing me here. I just want to see this note. Okay, so now, as a result of that was one of Linda's things there. It was basically just a to-do list. But by hitting tab, I can now see what her final clue is. So we could have a bottle of wine and hang out like we used to. So if I go and select the bottle of wine, that'll be her compromise, or her solution for today. So obviously, what's her principal motivation? She wants to get closer with Dan. Now, if we go over to Dan, I don't think I can read his final thoughts yet. I need to get, like, one more clue. And obviously, there's the bottle of wine over there that we could select. But let's, I'm gonna try to find... Basically, it's like more ambient notes, and as we find them, we will be able to, hopefully progress a little bit. We could also go for Tommy's, solution. We've already seen this one, right? Yeah. We could also go for Tommy's solution, which is almost certainly to spend more time with his dad. So why don't we go explore his memories while we're here? So we'll do this. Again, the stealth-based veneer of the game, it is pretty superficial. And he obviously wants to spend time with his father. It is pretty superficial. I've never really been caught. I've made the people suspicious an awful lot, but that doesn't seem to make that big of a difference, which is fine. This is very much, it's more of a story-based game than it is a gameplay-based game, and inevitably that's going to annoy some people who, take it as some kind of threat that this is something that people like. I don't know.
Are there any other kids?
We'll have to find out.
Are there any other kids?
We'll have to find out.
Dental plan. Anyway. So now if I... Oh, God, Tommy, don't look at me. Me and Daddy can play Racin' Roger. Okay, so that's his solution. So now we have 2 out of the 3 objects that we can use, and we can make a solution and a compromise here. Make Linda happy, make Tommy happy, but Dan wouldn't be happy. And I'd like to at least figure out what he needs to be happy in order to make this work. So this is like, it's an innately sad game because all of these outcomes and all of these solutions inevitably end up making one of the 3 people feel bad. So you'd be like, it starts out, and whenever they do like the outcomes for a chapter, you're like, oh good, like Linda and Dan had a bottle of wine, they haven't felt closer in weeks, and you're like, that's really cool. But then they'll say like, Tommy didn't understand why Dad hung out with Mommy instead of playing with him. He cried in his room for hours, and you're like, oh man. And then you're like, okay, well, what about Dan? And it's like, Dan didn't work on his book. His publisher got really mad at him, and he's worried that he's gonna lose his job. And you're like, oh, come on. It's like, it's full of these little, like, minor tragedies that are, like, heartbreaking, but also realistic, if that makes sense. Nobody's getting their limbs chopped off here. It's not harrowing in that sense, but, people are going through some serious stuff. And, I can't find... I found Dan's outcome once before. I don't know why. I know exactly what I need to pick to make it happen. Is she suspicious again? No. Maybe I must be missing a note somewhere. But anyway, oh, maybe it's this one behind the... No, never mind. Let's get out of here. Okay, so I know what Dan's outcome is. I can just go over to that. This is like the first time this has ever happened to me. I swear to God, that's what I tell everyone. But basically, if we find his journal, this will select... Oh, never mind. This might actually allow us to see him now. Okay, so that's the journal we were looking for. So we can read his thoughts. Where's my notebook? I know it had something good. So here's his notebook right here. We can select this and end the chapter with Dan's solution, but I don't want to do that. I've already done Dan's solution, and I want to see how differential the paths can be. So I'm going to go select the bottle of wine, and we're going to take Linda's solution with Tommy's compromise, if that makes any sense. I hope I've done a decent job explaining how the heck the structure of the game works. Otherwise, you may be confused by what's about to happen. We just find the object that they value in the environment, and we click on it. And so now we've selected Linda's solution for the chapter. So she and Dan are going to spend some time together at dinner tonight. Now, we have the option, as it loads into kind of like the second phase here, to choose a compromise. So there's one of two compromises we can take. Either we can go with Dan's notebook, so he'll focus on Linda and work. This is, I'll talk about this in just a second, or we can go get Tommy's board game, and Dan will focus on Linda and Tommy, if that makes sense. So, it's this constant, like, people, it mirrors life, and I don't mean to put that in a pretentious way, but everybody has wants and desires, and those wants and desires are connected to other people, but people don't have unlimited amount of time, right? If you spend time with someone, you're taking time away from somebody else, and it's this kind of, like, this conflict between, like, the desires and the realities of the situation that creates all these emotions that actually come up not only in real life, and of course that's an oversimplification of why people get mad and, you know, sad and resentful in real life, but anyway, in the game that makes sense. That's the microcosm of why people get mad in the game as well as in real life. But in the game, you know, people always want attention and they have these conflicting desires, and the inability to satisfy everybody really drives the plot forward. But you can still end up making this a successful summer for the family, although you're going to have trade-offs. If you strengthen your relationship with Linda, maybe you're going to hurt Dan, or okay, I shouldn't say your relationship because you're not technically playing as Dan, but if you strengthen the relationship between Dan and Linda, then maybe Tommy's development will suffer. It's strongly hinted that he has, like, developmental disabilities, or at least hardships, and he needs more attention if he's going to do well in school. But if you give him that attention, the relationship between Dan and Linda might suffer, or maybe Dan's book ends up falling on the back burner as a result. But anyway, let's read this journal. So it says, from the desk of Harold Baxter, January 15th, 1948. Mr. Lowry, I was that Mike Lowry from Bad Boys. Why, this isn't Northernlion, no Bad Boys references. You're talking about a game as art here. Mr. Lowry finally gave in and agreed to let me inspect the house. I believe he simply grew tired of hearing me ask, although I think deep down he knows I'm correct. A property like this simply doesn't change hands every year or two without a reason. I noticed the pattern when I was cleaning out old files and this house kept coming up. It's changed owners 7 times in the last 13 years. I began digging, and not a single one of the sales was financially motivated. People just seem to keep deciding that they'd rather live somewhere else, which just doesn't add up in my mind. The view is striking. The isolation and privacy alone make it a great property. The remoteness can't be an issue. Certainly no one who can afford this kind of home needs to work for money. It's a mystery, but that's why I'm here. So whenever we enter kind of like this ghost world, we can see these entries from the past. They kind of give us some hints as to what, you know, agent we're acting as. Are we a ghost? Are we a spirit? You know, what the heck is going on? But I won't talk too much more about that. So I'm going to select Tommy's board game here, and this will be our compromise. So Dan will put his book on the back burner, focus on Linda, and additionally spend some time with Tommy. And mind you, this is not like Linda's not going to be thrilled, or she'll be thrilled, but Tommy won't be thrilled. He'll just be like placated. So he's not going to be happy, but at least he's not going to be sad. And then we just whisper into Dan's ear what he's going to do. And I will read the outcomes that come about here. So the next night, Dan surprised Linda by grabbing a bottle of wine and asking her if she wanted to drink it and catch up. After they got Tommy into bed, they put on their favorite Miles Tanner record and cuddled on the couch, laughing and catching up on things before stumbling to bed. The summer was off to a good start for them. Thumbs up, real positive, right? I'll spoil this a little bit by talking about what I actually did in my real playthrough before this. And it's very different. Dan knew it was important to start the summer off on a good foot with Tommy, but he couldn't find time to play as long as Tommy wanted. He knocked off early enough to sneak in 2 games, and he made sure to let Tommy win both, but his son was disappointed that they hadn't had more time together. At least he spent some time with him, but as you can see, the son is still leaving a little bit disappointed that they couldn't play together a little bit more often. Dan couldn't get past his writer's block. He laid awake for 3 nights trying to think of a way out of his jam, but he couldn't come up with one. He had to stay on schedule, so he forced himself to write a scene just to keep moving. He hated each word as he typed it, but he had no choice. Alright, you know, truth be told, this is not the worst outcome, you know? But I'll explain, because it's going to load into Chapter 2 now. The way the game is subdivided, again, I mentioned this a little earlier, but basically there's 12 subchapters. Each one represents like a week of the summer and what the Kaplans are going through in their lives. So we start with writer's block. Second one is the inheritance, which is actually an interesting one as well. We're not going to play through it because I don't want to spoil too much of the game. But, you know, Dan is left a little bit of money, and then we decide how to react accordingly. So in that one, you know, Dan and Linda had a really nice night. Tommy at least got to spend some time with his father, and Dan didn't get by his writer's block. When I played this through myself, the first time, I didn't pick a compromise, and I actually picked Dan's outcome, which was to like lock himself in his room and eventually get over his writer's block, or like go to the beach and he was inspired or something like that. So he like professionally got through those problems, but then Linda took the bottle of wine and was just like read a book and drank the whole bottle of wine on the couch by herself and then fell asleep there, and she ended up spending the next morning dealing with a hangover because she got so drunk because she was so disappointed that her husband didn't spend time with her. And again, I didn't spend any time with Tommy either, so he just spent it like in his room trying to play by himself, but it was boring and he didn't enjoy himself. So, you know, I'd say this outcome worked out a little bit better, but we did throw Dan's professional responsibilities under the bus a little bit for his personal responsibilities. What's really genius about The Novelist is how there's no way out of this. There's no outcome that's positive for everybody. Every solution and compromise that you take is going to make some people happy. Not even happy, it's just going to make them feel less bad. But it's also going to make some people feel worse, if that makes sense. And again, this is not to say that this is an innately tragic or sad game, although to some extent it kind of is. But there are happy outcomes, but it's a realistically happy outcome. It's not a happy outcome like you saved the Earth from the aliens. It's a happy outcome like, oh, you and your wife mended the schism that has kind of been bothering you for a while. Or, you know, you invested a lot of hours into Tommy's education, and now all of a sudden he can read at the same level as the people that can read, or the kids in his grade, if that makes any sense. So again, they're minor victories, but these are real victories as well, the kind of real victories that happen in adult life as opposed to, you know, the fantasies of adolescent life, if that makes sense. So I mean, I realize that sounds incredibly pretentious. I'm gonna back out to the main menu here. Save and quit. Don't leave the game, just go to the main menu. In fact, I'm a little bit concerned that it's gonna completely quit the game. Let's talk frankly, right? A certain proportion of people out there are open and receptive to games like this. That's cool. You will like The Novelist. It's 20 bucks on Steam. Again, same thing with Gone Home. Is it expensive? Yeah, it is pretty expensive. This is a story that probably took me about 2.5 to 3 hours to beat all the way through. You can basically say, you know, 10 to 15 minutes per chapter, and each chapter is going to, or the game is made up of 12 chapters. So that's 2.5, 3 hours roughly. You can play through it again if you want to. Will I? Maybe. I'm erring on the side of probably not, but was it worth $20 for the story that I experienced? I think so, absolutely, yeah. It really made me think in a way that a lot of games just don't. And, you know, there's a certain proportion of people out there who are totally not into or receptive to these kinds of games at all. That's totally fine too. I'm glad you know what you like. The Novelist will not be that. Maybe if it goes super on sale, you might be interested in picking it up. But, you know, I see people tweet all the time. They're like, oh, I spent 2 hours with Gone Home, or I spent all this time with Dear Esther, and I'm actually mad about it. If you're one of those people, stay far away. You're not going to like it. But if you're one of those people who is totally open to this kind of game, and you know, you're willing to kind of lend it some time and let it breathe a little bit, and, you know, you're not too worried about the fact that the gameplay is just kind of a superficial veneer to kind of help you tell the story, I would encourage you to check it out. There's all sorts of different branching paths, and you can really feel yourself. Like, I found myself relating to Dan a lot. Like, I'm not a novelist, but, you know, I work from home. I set my own hours, and there's this pressure to work less, but also you want to work more because you feel like you should be working more. And, you know, everybody wants a little bit of your time. And I don't know, I got into the game for sure, and I think you wouldn't be surprised to find yourself finding a little bit of yourself in at least one of the characters in the game. Definitely one of the best narrative-based games of the year so far. So, again, if you're a fan of games like Gone Home, check it out. Again, 20 bucks on Steam. There will be a link in the video description below. A little bit pricey, but I think it's worth it at full price, and definitely if it goes down lower in price during one of the sales coming up at this time of year, or next year, depending on when you're watching the video, or 10 years down the road, maybe, I don't know, if the post-apocalyptic wasteland of YouTube is still around, then, yeah, I would definitely encourage you to check it out. I liked it a lot, and I really value the time that I spent with it, which is something I don't get to say all that often. So, as always, thanks for watching. Again, link in the video description below to pick this up on Steam if you're interested. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, make sure to click the like button to help me out. It really does lend a lot of support to the video. And of course, subscribe if you want to see more first impressions like this in the future. As always, thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.